This week, here now, Marco Rubio.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. We are reporting this morning from Islamabad, Pakistan, where Vice President Vance has just wrapped up marathon peace talks with Iran with no deal to end the war, now entering its 7th week. After 21 hours of overnight closed-door negotiations with Iran, mediated by Pakistan, the vice president emerged to say that the parties had failed to reach an agreement, saying Iran was unwilling to make a firm commitment on not seeking nuclear weapons. And with that, the U.S. delegation heads back to Washington, and a fragile 2-week ceasefire announced this week will now be put to the test. We will cover the very latest, both here and in Washington, but we begin with the state of the talks and what comes next in this conflict.
The bad news is that we have not reached an agreement.
This morning, no breakthrough in talks as the U.S. and Iran failed to hammer out a permanent resolution to the war in Iran.
And I think that's bad news for Iran, much more than it's bad news for the United States of America. We've made very clear what our red lines are, what things we're willing to accommodate them on, and what things we're not willing to accommodate them on. And we've made that as clear as we possibly could. And they have chosen not to accept our terms.
The two sides meeting behind closed doors for 21 hours, working well into the night to find a resolution, but yielding no progress.
The president told us, you need to come here in good faith and make your best effort to get a deal. We did that. And unfortunately, we weren't able to make any headway.
Iran's nuclear ambitions remaining a key sticking point.
The simple fact is that we need to see an affirmative commitment that they will not seek a nuclear weapon, and they will not seek the tools that would enable them to quickly achieve a nuclear weapon.
With Iran's Speaker of the Parliament and lead negotiator posting that the opposing side ultimately failed to gain the trust of the Iranian delegation in this round of negotiations. America has understood our logic and principles, and now it's time for it to decide whether it can earn our trust or not. Vice President Vance reaffirming the United States' position as he left Islamabad.
We leave here with a very simple proposal, a method of understanding that is our final and best offer. We'll see if the Iranians accept it.
As the marathon negotiations were wrapping, President Trump attending a UFC fight in Miami with Secretary of State Marco Rubio and dismissing the effort Saturday.
Whether we make a deal or not makes no difference to me.
The trilateral effort mediated by Pakistan was the highest level face-to-face meetings between the United States and Iran in 47 years. The breakdown in talks now putting the fragile temporary 2-week truce agreed upon late Tuesday to the test, with differences in those agreed upon terms emerging throughout the week. The administration claiming Iran had agreed to open the Strait of Hormuz. President Trump posting on social media Saturday that the U.S. is now starting the process of clearing out the Strait of Hormuz as a favor to countries all over the world. The Pentagon said 2 Navy destroyers were clearing mines. In the days since the announced agreement, few ships have crossed the passage, which remains under Iranian control. And on the key sticking point of Iran's nuclear ambitions, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth insisting this week the U.S. will secure Iran's enriched nuclear material.
We know exactly what they have, and they know that, and they will either give it to us, which the president has laid out. They'll give it to us voluntarily. We'll get it. We'll take it out.
The temporary truce came under immense pressure. Just before Tuesday night's deadline to Iran, Trump stunningly said, "A whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. I don't want that to happen, but it probably will." A lot to discuss. I'm joined now by GOP Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin. Good morning to you, Senator. You have been a supporter of this war, but after 21 hours of really historic negotiations, there was no deal cut. And it's basically, according to JD Vance, take it or leave it. What's your reaction?
Well, good morning, Martha. Well, first of all, I'm not supportive of the war with Iran, but that's because Iran declared war on America 47 years ago. They have blood on their hands of American soldiers, hundreds, probably thousands of them. But it's the Ayatollahs, it's the regime that declared war on America, not the Iranian people. So we're not at war with the Iranian people. We're trying to end the state-sponsored terrorism. We're trying to end the threat the menace that Iran represents not only to America but to world security and peace. So I'm supportive of ending the Iranian regime's ability to threaten world peace and security.
And what's your reaction to what happened here in Islamabad with no deal? What do you think happens now?
I'm not surprised at all. The Ayatollahs, even though they've been, so degraded in terms of their capabilities, nobody thought this would be easy. They've been preparing for this for 47 years. They have multiple layers. They've got 200,000 people in the IRGC, 600,000 people in the Basij police force. They are brutal. By the way, this is exactly what nationwide gun control results in. The Iranian people are completely disarmed. It's going to be very difficult for them to rise up. And so it's a very difficult situation. Now, I hope that President Trump is successful in this, because if we could just imagine the world if the Ayatollahs, the brutal Iranian regime is no longer in power. That's what we're trying to achieve.
The president was at a UFC fight in Florida with Marco Rubio during the negotiations. He was getting updates, but earlier in the day, he said, whether we make a deal or not makes no difference to me, and the reason is because we've won. It makes no difference?
Well, first of all, we will not have won until we have completely defanged the Iranian regime. We have to make sure. I thought it was very interesting in President Trump's address to the nation when he spoke to the families at Dover, how apparently to a person they said, finish the job. And to me, finishing the job is to make sure that Iran can never produce a nuclear weapon. They can no longer enrich uranium, that hopefully we can remove that enriched uranium, that they can no longer hold the Strait of Hormuz hostage, that they can no longer brutalize the Iranian people, they can no longer be a sponsor of state terror. So we have to finish the job. Again, there's multiple ways of potentially doing it. Short term, long term, there are multiple avenues we can approach here, but we have not yet finished the job.
Meanwhile, we have 50,000 troops in harm's way right now. We have Gulf allies in harm's way. We have gas prices spiking, oil barrels, the price raised there. President Trump was asked about people who are not fans of the war, asked specifically, what do you say to Americans who are not fans of the war? And he said, they're foolish because the war is about one thing: Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. So what would you say to those Americans who are sitting at home, seeing those 50,000 troops in harm's way, seeing gas prices spike, and listening to you saying how complicated this could be and that it could continue for a long time?
Well, first of all, it's a good answer. That's exactly the reason why we have to make sure that the Iranian regime is ended. Whether it's President Obama, President Biden, President Trump, they all said we can never allow Iran to become a nuclear power. The problem with what President Obama and Biden did is they coddled the regime. They funneled billions of dollars, strengthened the regime, allowed them to sponsor state terror, allowed them to continue enriching uranium. And at some point in time, we had to act before we couldn't. Before Iran became a nuclear power, before they had so many missiles and so many drones that this kind of action would have devastated the region. It's already done enough damage. So again, I know it's a tough decision for President Trump because he knew it wouldn't be easy. And it's not easy, and it could be longer term here. But I don't believe it's going to require boots on the ground, potentially assets to help the Iranian people. Other people eventually completely destroy the regime. But let's face it, this regime is incredibly weakened. All their bold statements reminds me of Baghdad Bob. They are not in a position of strength right now. And we also have to make sure that China and Russia no longer help Iran. I heard a very disturbing report that apparently China's going to be sending man pads to Iran. We need to express in no uncertain terms, China had better not do that. We certainly have the capability of blocking oil from the Strait of Hormuz going to China as well. So again, we have plenty of
Senator,
power in this situation, and we need to use it.
Senator, I want to go back to you saying that President Trump had a good answer about what do you say to Americans who are not a fan of the war. He did say they're foolish. Do you agree they're foolish not to be fans of the war?
No. No, the answer he gave that I agreed with is we cannot allow Iran to become a nuclear power. They have missile technology. All they would have to do is park a barge in international waters off the shores of the U.S., lob one of those missiles, have a high altitude nuclear blast, an EMP event. We could wipe out America's electrical grid. That would be an existential threat to America. So Iran represents an existential threat to America. That's why Obama, Biden, and Trump said we can't allow them to become a nuclear power, but they're racing toward it. You know, Martha, if Iran didn't want to be attacked, they want to be left alone, all they had to do was say, we're not going to enrich uranium. We'll allow inspectors in to make sure that we're not doing it. Because they didn't allow that, because they allowed their economy to become devastated, just proves the point that they were absolutely dedicated to become a nuclear power and threaten and potentially destroy America. We had to take that threat seriously.
But Senator, they're not doing that. They're not stopping. The strait is essentially closed. They still have that enriched uranium. So what do you do now? You yourself did not like the president threatening civilian power grids and structures. So if the ceasefire fails, what do they go after? What do they do?
Again, you keep degrading the Iranian regime. I think it's interesting that you have Iranians actually calling in airstrikes against some of their leadership. It's remarkable the amount of destruction we've already brought to the Iranian regime without really harming that much civilian infrastructure. So again, I think we continue down that path. We make sure that we deter China and Russia from helping out Iran. We continue to weaken the regime until they are no longer effective and the Iranian people can reclaim their own liberty and take over Iran themselves. Again, it's going to be a long-term project.
That could go on for a long time.
I don't think Trump thought it'd be easy. It could take a long time. But again, the threat was there, and the threat was growing. And at some point in time, we had to act before we no longer could. That's why I supported what President Trump, when he made an incredibly difficult decision to finally act. But now we have to finish the job. And that may take some time, and it could be complicated, and it could be risky. There's no guarantees here, but we could not allow Iran to become a nuclear power, threaten the region, threaten the world.
Okay, thank you very much for joining us this morning, Senator. Appreciate it.
Have a good day.
Let's bring in Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia, a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee and Foreign Relations Committee. Good morning to you, Senator. You saw these negotiations break down. JD Vance said they presented the final offer and then he went home. What is your reaction?
Well, Martha, we need to extend the ceasefire. We shouldn't be in this war to begin with. You know, what people need to realize is we had a diplomatic control over Iran not seeking a nuclear weapon that Donald Trump decided to tear up. And we had an open Strait of Hormuz and reasonable gas prices up until February 27th when Donald Trump launched this war without the support of allies, the American public, or Congress. And so the ceasefire, while it is not perfectly holding, we need to find a way to extend it past April 21st. Both parties, when they left the negotiation in Pakistan, said the door wasn't closed to additional negotiation. And so even an imperfect ceasefire is better than resuming full war. I'm going to force a vote on another war powers resolution in Congress this week in the Senate, because returning to full war will just compound the suffering of American troops and the American citizenry who are suffering under a very, very devastated economy because of what Donald Trump has done.
You heard JD Vance, however, say it was a final offer. Whether he's open to talking to them again is something different than saying this is the final offer. We're welcome for you to come back and accept it or not. The Iranians have stood firm. They walked away from here as well, saying they would like to get closer to the American side. This seems like an absolute red line for President Trump.
I'm not sure what President Trump's red lines are because they seem to change all the time. His rationale for the war has changed all the time. You know, the threat to bomb the entire civilization, and 90 minutes before that, okay, we're not going to bomb the entire civilization. And I don't know exactly what the offer was that J.D. Vance put on the table. He had a brief press conference and he said, we need to make sure that Iran doesn't get a nuclear weapon. But Martha, as you know, Iran entered into an agreement with the United States and other nations, both allies of the U.S. and China and Russia, in 2016, reaffirming that they would never purchase, seek, or acquire a nuclear weapon. Donald Trump tore that up. He tore up the restrictions on uranium production. He tore up the restrictions on centrifuge production. He tore up the deal that allowed intrusive inspections in Iran. So JD Vance says now that, well, Iran won't agree to what they agreed to 10 years ago. I'm sure Iran wonders, if we agree to it, will the United States tear it up again and bomb our civilian infrastructure and kill school children and engage in an assassination campaign against our leadership? This is not going to be an easy negotiation, because the last negotiation that led to a control of Iran's nuclear program, the U.S. made the decision to tear it up and walk away from the deal. I think that decision by President Trump to tear up a diplomatic deal will go down in history as one of the worst decisions in the foreign policy space ever made by an American president. If you make diplomacy impossible, you tend to make war inevitable.
And the war itself, one of the things you just heard Senator Johnson talk about is what he said now, whether, they tore up that or not. He said now they are, Iran, an existential threat. Do you do not believe it's an existential threat, or there was an imminent threat?
There was no imminent threat. They are a regional threat. The regime is bad actors, for sure. The tragedy is the U.S. and Iran were friends in World War II. We were allies until the U.S. toppled the Iranian government in 1953. And since then, it's been back and forth between the U.S. and Iran for not 47 years, but for 80 years. And if war was the answer, we would have found it before now. They are a regional threat, but they posed no imminent threat to the United States. I'm on both the Armed Services and Foreign Relations committees. I'm in the classified facility at the Capitol all the time, and there was zero evidence of an imminent threat to the homeland from Iran. There was suggestion that if Israel attacked Iran, Iran might then turn its attention to U.S. forces in the region, our 40,000 permanent forces that we have. We should have talked Israel out of attacking so as to minimize risk to our own forces. Instead, we accepted the notion that Israel would attack, but there was no imminent threat to the United States from Iran, from a nuclear program, for their ballistic missile program, or for their other military activities. That doesn't mean that they're a good guy. They're a regional threat, but they weren't a threat to the U.S. homeland.
Senator, if we could just close on this, Trump has continued to blast NATO allies who are not supporting opening up the Strait of Hormuz. A president can't pull out of NATO, of course, but he could pull troops out. Are you concerned about that?
Yes. I mean, the president has been trashing NATO for years, long before he was president. And in this term, the tariffs that he has imposed on our allies, the language that he uses, calling Canada, a NATO ally, a 51st state, threatening the attack of Greenland, a part of Denmark, another NATO ally. He's really hurt NATO, and then he starts a war without consulting with them that has a huge effect on NATO allies' economy, and then gets mad that they won't join in. I mean, it's like you don't sucker punch somebody in a bar and then blame your buddies when they don't join the fight with you. I mean, if the president wanted the support of allies, he should have valued allies and respected them rather than putting tariffs on their economies and trash talking them.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there, and I appreciate you coming on this morning. Thanks so much, Senator. When we come back, General Joseph Votel, the former CENTCOM commander, tells us what may be next.